The container shouldn't have been breathing. Ethan Cole pressed his ear against the cold metal, listening to the faint rhythmic sound coming from inside. The manifest said machine parts. The weight distribution said otherwise. He glanced around the empty spaceport loading bay, then broke the seal. The door hissed open and he stumbled backward. A child sat curled in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, skin pale blue and marked with intricate silver patterns that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Her eyes were too large, too aware, fixed on him with an intelligence that made his breath catch. Cringe. She wore rags and trembled despite the warm earth air. Ethan had spent 15 years hauling cargo across human territories, and he'd never seen anything like her. He should have called authorities. Quarantine protocols existed for reasons. Alien contact required military clearance, medical teams, containment procedures. Instead, he wrapped her in his jacket and carried her to his truck. Basic. She weighed almost nothing. Her fingers clutched the fabric with desperate strength, and something in that grip told him she'd been abandoned on purpose, left to die in a box bound for a recycling facility. The thought made him angry in a way he hadn't felt in years, not since the war took his daughter. He drove toward his home in the remote hills, checking his mirrors constantly. The girl never made a sound. His house sat alone on 20 acres of scrubland, far from neighbors and surveillance. Ethan laid her on the couch and tried to offer water. She stared at the glass but didn't move. He tried food next, simple bread and fruit. Nothing. She just watched him with those vast, unblinking eyes, the silver markings on her arms and face pulsing faster when he came too close. Hours passed. She didn't sleep, didn't speak, didn't cry. Only watched. Ethan found himself talking to fill the silence, explaining who he was, promising he wouldn't hurt her. The markings would brighten when his voice rose, dim when he whispered. She was listening, understanding, but something kept her locked inside herself. By evening, exhaustion pulled at him. But he couldn't leave her like this, filthy and afraid. He ran a bath, testing the temperature carefully. When he returned, she was exactly where he'd left her, still as a statue. He knelt down, moving slowly, and gestured toward the bathroom. She didn't resist when he lifted her, didn't fight when he carried her to the tub. Her weight felt fragile in his arms, bird-like bones beneath skin that shimmered faintly in the light. He set her down beside the water and stepped back, giving her space. She stared at the bath, then at him, then back at the water. Something like fear crossed her features. Ethan spoke softly, demonstrating with his hand how the water was safe, warm, gentle. She hesitated, then slowly extended one small foot toward the surface. The moment her skin touched water, the world exploded into light. The silver markings ignited like stars, blazing so bright Ethan threw up his arm to shield his eyes. The bathroom filled with holographic projections, three-dimensional maps spinning in the air, star systems he'd never seen, coordinates cascading in alien script alongside human numbers. Warnings flashed in red, weapon signatures, danger zones, locations marked with symbols that made his military training scream alerts. The girl stood in the center of it all, eyes wide, water dripping from her foot, the markings covering every inch of her skin now alive and burning with information. She wasn't just a child. She was a message. A living data carrier sent across the stars. The front door exploded inward. Ethan spun, instinct taking over, grabbing the girl and pulling her behind him. Three figures in tactical gear swept through his house, weapons raised, faces hidden behind helmets. The lead one spoke, voice distorted by a modulator. They wanted the package. They wanted her. Now. Ethan's mind raced. These weren't government agents. No identification, no protocols, just mercenaries hunting a prize. The girl's data, the locations burned into her skin. Someone wanted them badly enough to kill. He backed toward the bathroom window, hand finding the emergency pistol he kept in the cabinet. The mercenaries advanced. Ethan fired twice, dropping the first one, then grabbed the girl and crashed through the window into the night. They ran through scrubland, thorns tearing at clothes, darkness both enemy and ally. The girl kept pace, silent and fast, her glowing markings dimmed now, but still faintly visible. Shots cracked behind them. Ethan knew this terrain, every rock and gully from years of solitary walks. He led them toward the old mining tunnels, abandoned since before the war, a maze only locals remembered. They slid into the entrance just as searchlights swept overhead. Inside, the girl finally stopped, chest heaving, and looked up at him. Her lips moved, forming sounds that struggled to become words. When she spoke, her voice was small, frightened, but clear. She said her people were dying. She said they sent her to find help. She said the markings showed where weapons were hidden, weapons that could save her world or destroy it if the wrong hands found them first. Ethan understood then. She wasn't abandoned. She was sent. A desperate gamble by a desperate people, encoding their last hope into a child and launching her toward the one species crazy enough to help strangers, humanity. He had a choice. Turn her over to authorities, let them dissect her data and maybe her body, or trust that the message she carried mattered more than his safety. He thought of his daughter, lost to violence he couldn't prevent. He thought of all the times humanity had failed to protect the innocent. Not this time. He pulled out his communicator and broadcast the star maps on every human defense frequency, sending the girl's message into the network where it couldn't be buried or silenced. Alarms would trigger, questions would be asked, but the truth would spread. The mercenaries found them minutes later, but they weren't alone. Human military dropships descended like thunder, responding to the broadcast, surrounding the tunnels with overwhelming force. The mercenaries tried to run. They didn't make it far. Soldiers poured in, weapons ready, faces hard until they saw the girl. One of them, a woman named Victoria, lowered her rifle and knelt down, speaking gently, asking if she was hurt. The girl looked at Ethan, then back at Victoria, and slowly shook her head. Within hours, Command verified the data. The weapons cache was real, powerful enough to shift the balance in the sector. They secured it before hostile forces arrived, and the girl's people received an offer of sanctuary, protection, a chance to survive. Weeks later, after debriefings and medical exams that confirmed she was healthy, after diplomats negotiated and her people began arriving on Earth, the girl stood in Ethan's rebuilt home. They'd given her a name from her language, something musical and complex, but she rarely used it. She looked up at Ethan, the markings on her skin now quiet, just faint silver lines that caught the light. She'd learned more human words, practiced them carefully with the linguists and therapists, but the words she spoke now, she'd chosen herself. She reached up and took his hand, squeezing tight, and smiled for the first time since he'd found her. Her voice was steady, certain, filled with something that sounded like hope. She called him father, and Ethan felt his broken heart remember how to beat again. Humanity had answered the call. One man had chosen compassion over fear, and in the vast, dark universe, that choice had changed everything.